Well, I'm excited to get started, but I want to share with you exactly what we're going to cover in this module here. First off, I need to make sure that you're comfortable with ADFS and what it does for you. So I'm going to provide you an overview. Then we're going to start drilling into the planning process for ADFS. Remember, we're focusing primarily on what we need to do on-prem to make sure we're ready for ADFS. We're going to look at the ADFS requirements to make sure we have everything in place. We're going to look at configuring ADFS with MFA, multi-factor authentication, that provides yet another level of security for you when it comes to individuals accessing your content. And lastly, we have a way to filter our identities, so I'm going to help you understand what are called claims rules as we go through this module. Now, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create an ADFS server farm. Now, the server farm could have just one server in it, but for redundancy, for duplication, we're most likely going to have two servers in it. If you're using Windows Server 2012 or previous, you also had a standalone option. Well, we don't have that in Windows Server 2012 R2. But just remember, if you have Server 2012 or earlier, you could create an ADFS standalone server, but we're not going there. We're 2012 R2 or 2016. We're going to create an ADFS server farm. And if I do create an ADFS server farm, what's it going to do for me? Well, three primary tasks. The first one is going to provide the synchronization with Active Directory between on-prem and Office 365. Azure AD actually provides user authentication, and it provides the SAML token to users for SSO, single sign-on. We talked about same sign-on, where I can use the same credentials to access resources locally, on-prem I mean locally, or in Office 365. Single sign-on means I provide the credentials once, allow me to access the content anywhere regardless of where it resides. And now there are three types of SSO. The first one is called session. Session SSO are cookies that are written for authenticated users, reducing the prompts when switching between apps during a specific session. We also have a persistent SSO, similar to the session SSO, but these can be maintained across multiple sessions. And these are applicable to registered devices or a user who has selected the option to keep me signed in, the KMSI. I love acronyms, so there's another one for you. And our third option is the application SSO. This is used in OAuth scenarios, so you can maintain single sign-on within a particular application. Now, that's just an overview of what ADFS provides us. Let's take a look at how this works. We have what are called authentication routes. So the first option is we have an internal user, and the internal user requests access to content in Office 365. Well, the Office 365 is going to request a token from the client. Say, look, I'd like to let you in, but I need some information about you. So Office 365 is going to say, I need a token. The client's going to come back and say, okay, I need a token. I need to talk to ADFS. So that'll reach out to an ADFS server in your ADFS server farm. The ADFS is going to request the authentication from Active Directory, your ADDC that's on-prem. The Active Directory is saying, yep, I know who this dude is. He's good to go. And after Active Directory authenticates, the ADFS issues a token to the user for access to the content in Office 365. Now, what if we have an external user? It works a little bit differently. I mentioned the idea of a DMZ. This is where it comes into play here. The external user is going to request access to Office 365. Well, Office 365 is going to redirect that request to your proxy server in the DMZ. The request is then going to be passed to your ADFS environment. The request from the ADFS environment is then going to be passed to Active Directory to make sure we have an account and approve the authentication. And then once that's approved, the ADFS will issue a token to that external user, and they'll be able to access the content in Office 365. So those are the two different authentication routes, one for an internal user and the other for an external user.